Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for coming tonight to this annual commemoration of the terrible events that happened in 1989 at Tiananmen Square on June 4th, 1989. And of course, we assemble for two reasons. One of the reasons that we assemble is to look back and to remember the men and women, not just in Beijing, but in a dozen cities in China that year, who were standing up for freedom and standing up for democracy. And of course, that movement was brutally crushed. And as I look out at this audience, I see that not only do we have friends who are from the larger China diaspora, but we have friends here representing the Cuban diaspora, the Vietnamese diaspora, and other ones who have also been victims and are witnesses of communism today. We're going to start tonight, though, by honoring a freedom champion. And the reason we do that is because, in a sense, Tiananmen keeps happening. It happens in Xinjiang province. It happens in Hong Kong. It happens with the repression of religious and ethnic minorities. It happens in Tibet. But there are people who are courageous, who inspire us by their example. Each year, VOC gives an award to a human rights activist for conspicuous bravery in standing up against communism. Our awardee in 2026 is a young woman who started speaking out against communism at the age of 14. During the crackdown in Hong Kong by the CCP, she organized a global solidarity effort to stand with the people of Hong Kong. And then when the CCP instituted its new national security law in 2020, she sought asylum in the United States. In fact, there's a 1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty on her head. Many of you know her for the inspirational figure that she is and the constant foe of totalitarianism. Would you help me in welcoming the 2026 Human Rights Dissident Award for the Victims of Communism Foundation, Frances Ooi. So I'm going to hand you this. We'll do a quick photo for the I'm going to let you stand for a moment.
On my own? Okay.
And Francis, you can give it to Circle, and I'll give you the microphone. Would you like for me to hold this for you? What do you got?
It's fine. I will hold it. Thank you, Dr. Patterson, thank you so much. Thank you for your very kind words. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, for this tremendous honor. To receive this on June 4th is really deeply humbling. I accept it with deep gratitude, but not as mine alone. Tonight, it belongs to the students who stood in Tiananmen Square in 1989. It belongs to my friends sitting in Hong Kong's prison cells as I speak. And it belongs to the 2 million Hong Kongers who once marched through our streets for democracy. I'm not any braver than any one of them, but because of their courage, I know that I'm not alone. If there is any honor here, it's theirs first, and I'm only here to hold their lights up a little higher. I was born 10 years after the Tiananmen massacre. I've never saw the tank with my own eyes. But like so many Hong Kongers of my generation, I inherited the memory. And that memory shaped us. Growing up in Hong Kong, June 4th was not a prohibited, forbidden phrase. It was not something we had to research for in secret. When I first learned about the Tiananmen massacre, I was just about 10. I remember reading about it, seeing images, and just trying to understand why and how a government would turn their weapons against its own people just because they asked for freedom. That year, I asked my parents to take me to Victoria Park for the annual candlelight vigil. I still remember standing in hundreds and thousands of candles, a sea of lights, candles held by people who I've never met, but we're all there for one reason, for the same reason. And on the ground, I wrote with a piece of chalk in clumsy with really clumsy child handwriting, a slogan that Hong Kongers had carried for a generation. 薪火相傳，平反六四. Pass the torch, vindicate June 4th. At that time, that freedom felt ordinary. We could post photos from the vigil. We could buy books about June 4th. We could watch documentaries. We could chant slogans like end one-party rule in the public. And I came to understand that this ordinariness was a privilege that carries responsibility. Hong Kong kept the memory alive not because we're braver than anyone else, but because history have handed the duty into us. When Beijing tried to erase June 4th on the mainland, Hong Kongers kept the candles burning. Today, that Hong Kong has changed. The vigil is banned. Its organizers have been prosecuted. The history have been rewritten and erased from public life. Friends of mine are in prison. Others are in exile. And I live under a bounty placed on me by the Hong Kong authorities. Beijing made a calculation. They believed that if they could blow out the candles, they could blow out our memory. But it was wrong. Because in Hong Kong tonight, even now, people still find a way. Yes, they cannot fill the Victoria Park, but they showed up. They brought flowers and candles in their hands. They raised their fingers to mark 6 and 4. Some wear black and stand in silence. And many were taken away from police for it. They know the risk, and they do it anyway. That is the bravest thing I know. So, look around you tonight. They try to put out the light in Victoria Park, but the flame didn't die. It crossed an ocean. It found its way to this square, to this city, to this very night. And that is what 薪火相傳 really means. Pass the flame from one generation to another, from those who can no longer speak to those of us who still can. And that is why tonight matters. When we light candles here, we're not only mourning the dead, we are telling the world that the massacre did happen. And no amount of force is going to make the world forget. And we're telling everyone who still live under repression, the Tiananmen mothers, the prisoners, the Hong Kongers, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, the Chinese dissidents in this very square, that you are not forgotten. I know many of us feel tired sometimes. It's been almost 4 decades now. And I do too. I do feel tired sometimes in advocacy. Exile is not easy. There are days when I think about my city, my family, my friends in prison, and I ask myself, does any of this actually work? Is this worth it? But then I think of those who have paid a far greater price for this. I think of Xiuhong Jin, who has kept June 4th alive in Hong Kong, even behind bars. He had just finished a 37-hour-long hunger strike to mark this day. I think of Jimmy Lai, Joshua Wong, Li Chut-yen, and Albert Ho, and so many others whose name may not be known to the world, but whose courage is no less real. And I think of the Hong Kong I once knew, where a 10-year-old girl could hold a candle in Victoria Park and be carried by that memory all the way to here, to Washington. These things have taught me that courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing the responsibility even when fear is present, even when it means a bounty on my head, even when it means prison cells. That is what this award means to me tonight. I want it to be a reminder not of what one person has done, but of the responsibility we all have. A responsibility to speak for those the CCP has tried to silence. A responsibility to defend those who are imprisoned for the truth. And a responsibility, when the flame is passed to us, to carry it forward to the next generation. Because the story of June 4th did not end in 1989. We all know it. It lives in every person who refuses to forget the truth. It lives in Hong Kong. It lives in every movement for freedom against tyranny. And it lives here tonight in every candles we hold. Thank you for this honor. I will carry it with humility, with gratitude, and with a renewed promise that no bounty, no intimidation, no threats against my loved ones and me will stop me from fighting until Hong Kong is free, until my friends are free, and until no one is ever punished again for remembering June 4th. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francis. And I would like to welcome you all once again for gathering here tonight. And we have a very good line of speakers whom we're honored to have with us today, this evening, this solemn day. We will start with Arthur Liu, a long-time dissident from China and the proud father of an Olympian, Alyssa Liu. We will then have Joey Su, spokesperson for Amnesty International Hong Kong Overseas. We will have Piero Tozzi, Senior Director for China Policy at America First Policy Institute, followed by Jekielek, Senior Editor at Epoch Times, Ilshat Kokbore, Research Director at Center for Uyghur Studies, Tsultrim Gyatso, Chinese Liaison Officer for the Office of Tibet, Ciping Huang, Executive Director for Wei Jinsheng Foundation, and Xiuhong Jin, founder of the Chinese Democracy and Human Rights Alliance. So without further ado, I will give the microphone to Mr. Liu.
Thank you for that introduction. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to ask each and every one of you to have a moment of silence in memory of those who were massacred during the Tiananmen Square massacre, and also those who were killed under the communist regime. Thank you. June 4th is always a sad day for me. 37 years ago, June 3rd, around midnight, I heard the horrible news that tanks and guns had been used against the students in Beijing. I was so angry. I was so devastated. All the students wanted was some more freedom, democracy, and that the government is held accountable for its own actions and the crackdown on corruption at that time. In May and June 1989, I was organizing demonstrations in Guangzhou at that time. In response to the massacre, I organized even more protests in Guangzhou. The same day, on June 4th, thousands of students demonstrated with me. We had sit-ins on Haizu Bridge and also blocked the railway station to Beijing from Guangzhou. We just wanted to express our anger, our frustration against a government who dared to use guns and machine guns and tanks against his own students. Of course, I became the most wanted person in southern China afterwards. And I'm a very lucky man. Soon after I was wanted, I was helped out of China. I fled to Hong Kong. And the Operation Yellowbird, the organization in Hong Kong, helped me, and I've seen hundreds of other students and scholars from mainland China. And then we were resettled. Some of us were resettled in the United States. Some went to Canada. And all the people who were being persecuted 37 years later in Hong Kong, Jimmy Lai and thousands of others, they helped us back in 1989. Without their help, most of us probably would have perished in the prison in China. So I'm greatly thankful to all the people in Hong Kong, and I want everybody to remember that they were the ones who helped us out of China. And today I really call upon everybody to pay attention to what's going on in mainland China and also in Hong Kong, and call upon the Chinese government for the release of all political prisoners in China and Hong Kong. So with that, I want to give a microphone to the next speaker. Thank you.
I want to first thank Arthur for the remarks and thank the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation for organizing this very important annual vigil to help us remember that June 4th is not just an event that happened in the past 37 years ago, but something that we need to actively remember because it marks the Chinese Communist Party's ongoing oppressions against the Chinese people, the Hong Kongers, Tibetans, Uyghurs, and dissidents and voices all across the world. 37 years ago, in the early hours of June 4th, 1989, armed soldiers and hundreds of tanks moved into the heart of Beijing in Tiananmen Square and opened fire on people who were doing nothing more than standing in a public square peacefully with only hope in their hands. The Chinese government has never told the truth about what happened that night. It has never accepted responsibility or accountability. Instead, for 37 years, it has surveilled the families of victims, arrested those who dared to remember, who worked methodically, deliberately, to erase June 4th from history. For many of us, like me and Francis and so many other friends here who grew up in Hong Kong, June 4th was not a distant historical event. It was always on the news programs that we watched at 6:30 during dinner. It was on the front pages of newspaper. It was the stories that our parents, our teachers, our peers would talk about at school, and every eve when June 4th arrives. Every year from 1990 to 2019, tens of thousands gathered at Hong Kong's Victoria Park. Candles are held in dark, names spoken aloud, and this act of conscience was also how the many, many curious individuals from inside of China, outside of China, across the world were able to get to learn about June 4th, and that was their first exposure to CCP's oppression for the very first time. We have been talking about memory. Memory is a very interesting factor. It can be so exclusive that you are the only person who remember exactly and distinctly how you felt in that exact moment when you first heard about the Tiananmen massacre. It can also be so inclusive that this event that happened in Beijing 37 years ago, which some of us experienced in person, some of us experienced from afar, some of us who've only read about it from textbooks or heard about it in news programs, all share this piece of collective memory that bonded generations, ethnicities, communities, and different movements inside of China, outside of China, across the world. And that is why it is so important that the Chinese Communist Party tries to erase memories, because it is powerful. Since the national security law took effect in Hong Kong in 2020, at least 57 people have been arrested simply for commemorating this day, simply for holding a vigil, holding a candle, or simply by walking in the streets of Hong Kong this day. The park, the Victoria Park, has been sealed. The publishers and journalists behind the newspapers that I grew up reading were arrested and convicted. Organizers of the vigil has been shut down and thrown behind bars. And tonight I want to bring you a voice from inside one of those persons behind the bars, Xiuhong Jin, like many of us have talked about. A barrister, activist, former vice chair of the Hong Kong Alliance, held without conviction for over 1,700 days. And this year, on the 37th anniversary, she again went on a hunger strike to tell the world that even behind bars in Hong Kong, even in solitary confinement, she is still trying her very best to remember this day, because memory is powerful. And that is what reminds the world that we're not forgetting about June 4th. And from the prison, she wrote on Patreon, checking that power and ending dictatorship is therefore non-negotiable. There is no room for retreat or evasion. And to preserve the memory of June 4th is to safeguard that very same baseline of human decency. When we take that extra step in accordance with our conscience, the reach of authoritarian power shrinks by that very measure. What happened on June 4th and what happened in Hong Kong since 6 years ago are not two separate stories. It's the same. It's a one continuous story about what power does, what the CCP does when they're not checked, about how quickly freedom disappears when we look away and forget what is happening. And that should be a warning that all of us are taking today in this world. We're standing here tonight from outside of Hong Kong, outside of China, because standing inside has become this crime that could put you behind bars. But us here, by being present here tonight, we're showing the world, showing the CCP that despite the waves of oppression and erasure, we are still remembering. A candle lit for June 4th does not only burn in Victoria Park in Hong Kong on White Night a year. It burns every time someone, us, remembers. Every time someone speaks a name, every time someone talks about the victims that passed on Tiananmen Square, every time we talk about Xiuhong Jin, Albert Ho, and Li Cheyan, who are currently in jail in Hong Kong. Every time a room full of people refuses to let silence win, we ourselves are the candles that the CCP cannot blow away. Our minds are the vigils that they cannot shut down. And with that, I want to invite all of you to hold your candles up high and renew your promise and our memory that we will not forget about June 4th. We will not forget about Xiuhong Jin until they are free, until we can freely talk about June 4th in China and Hong Kong, and when our democratic freedoms and human rights are finally respected. The story of the Hong Kong Alliance has been written and has been told, and now it is up to all of us to carry it forward. And it is up to all of us to carry the spirit forward until all of them are free. And I hope that with that promise and memory renewed, I will be able to see all of you next year in Victoria Park in Hong Kong, where we will be finally able to talk about June 4th freely. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, tonight we gather in mourning and memory. Tonight we honor those who once dreamed of a free and democratic China, idealistic youth who were murdered for demanding democracy and denouncing totalitarian tyranny. Tonight, this act of remembrance defies the Chinese Communist Party. We are taking a stand to preserve memory and fight against historical amnesia, defying the narrative that the Chinese Communist Party seeks to impose. The preservation of memory is what historians like Yang Jisheng and Rowena Xiaoqing do in their books, which give true account and voice to those who perished during atrocities like the Great Leap Forward and the Tiananmen Massacre. Indeed, Rowena He's voice is especially poignant on this night of the Tiananmen martyrs, for preserving those Tiananmen voices has been her life work, and indeed, she spoke very eloquently here last year at this gathering at this very place. So we're thankful for her voice and also those of emerging leaders like Frances Hui, who's being honored tonight. So thank you, Frances, for her advocacy on behalf of Hong Kong, and Joey as well, you know, the young generation. And as we heard so eloquently, and I'm just adding to it, Hong Kong was once a place where the greatest of candlelight vigils were held in Victoria Park, yet those candles have all been extinguished. In Hong Kong, democracy disappeared, and voices of conscience like that of the great Jimmy Lai are muffled at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party. And that's why it's so important that we keep the flame alive and remember this night of all nights. For the CCP seeks to erase history. Ironically, the Communist Party calls what we're doing historical nihilism, 历史事物主义, which is sometimes translated as historical revisionism. It levels this accusation against us in a document that I would encourage everyone to familiarize themselves with. It's called the Communique on the Current State of the Ideological Sphere, or more colloquially, Document Number 9. Now, it's circulated at the highest levels of the Communist Party back in 2012 and 2013. Coterminous with the rise of Xi Jinping to power. What they call historical nihilism is preserving any memory that contradicts the ideologically infused narrative of the Chinese Communist Party. But is what we are doing nihilism or revisionism? No. Rather, it is truth-telling. And that is also one reason why it's very important that the artificial intelligence race is one, that it's so critical, because whomever controls AI controls historical narratives. Okay? It's about the history that'll shape the minds of the next generation. And as George Orwell once said, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Thank you. And that is why the candles in Victoria Park were snuffed out. It also raises the uncomfortable question of why there are not more candlelight vigils on this night, especially on university campuses, commemorating June 4th. And the question remains, is it because of the massive amounts of money that flow into major American universities from Chinese actors with state ties? There is a cognitive battlefield where what will be learned by the next generation is in contention. Again, the Communist Party seeks to shape historical narratives, to erase truth, which is why they target universities. And it also, I want to talk about it briefly about a very important case where Hoover Institution at Stanford University stood up when the CCP sought to control historical memory. There were these diaries by Li Rui, who was one of Mao Zedong's secretaries. Stanford was the target of lawfare in that case. And those diaries are especially relevant to those of us gathered here tonight, because among this honest truth teller, a party insider who saw the truth, he wrote about Tiananmen and the Tiananmen Square massacre. And it's why it's so important that Judge John Tigar, a shout out to him, from the Federal District Court for the Northern District of California, ruled in favor of Stanford, because he understood that a default judgment obtained in a Chinese court is an outcome that is dictated by the needs of the Chinese Communist Party. And there's no independent judiciary in Communist China. And I also would like to give kudos to Tom Kellogg, who's a professor right around the corner here at Georgetown University, the Georgetown Law Center. He gave expert testimony to aid the court, noting why the CCP would want to exercise control over this case and dictate the outcome. And he said the CCP tightly controls information in China to support its version of history and the ideas it wants to promote. The Lee materials present a version of history that is different from the approved party narrative, and the CCP wants to prevent the public from being exposed to that version of history. Exactly. And that's why tonight's witness is so important. And may the candles that you bear and the torch borne by the goddess of democracy, of liberty behind us never burn out, but be held high until one day tyrants fall and the Chinese people can enjoy the blessings of liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Piero. I'm looking for, here you go. Yeah. Please join us.
Thank you, Sir Ken. So good evening, everybody. My name is Jan Jekielek. I'm the senior editor at the Epoch Times and author of a book titled Killed to Order, China's Organ Harvesting Industry and the True Nature of America's Biggest Adversary. And this nature is something that we haven't gotten right, and we should have when Tiananmen Square happened and the massacre happened. So tonight we remember the victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre, the students, the workers, and the ordinary citizens murdered on June 4th, 1989, for daring to imagine a freer China. On the front page of the Epoch Times today, we are publishing a whole series of never-before-seen photos that were contributed to us recently. They were taken by a state media photographer 37 years ago. These are very powerful images. I encourage you to check it out. The person that put these together, Eva Fu, she's actually here doing an article on this event, so I hope you get a chance to speak with her later today. It's a striking historical fact that the same day, June 4th, 1989, Poland held its first semi-free parliamentary election since the communist era. Solidarity won a landslide victory, and hope began to spread across Eastern Europe, and the Berlin Wall fell. In Poland, people chose freedom, but in China, the regime chose slaughter. The massacre itself was monstrous, but hope died twice that year. First, in the blood of the streets of Beijing, and again when the United States responded not with sustained accountability, but with quiet accommodation. Just weeks after the killings, the administration at the time secretly dispatched the National Security Advisor and the Deputy Secretary of State to Beijing. Their mission was to signal to the Chinese leadership that America would ride out the storm of public outrage and work to restore the strategic relationship. Most Americans never knew about this back channel. For decades, we pursued a policy of engagement, telling ourselves the comforting story that trade and money would change China, that economic integration would liberalize the regime and make it a responsible stakeholder. The opposite happened. The Chinese Communist Party changed us. It turned our openness into vulnerability. It captured influence in our institutions. It made us economically dependent on a system built on lies, on repression, and on brutality. And then in the year 2000, the regime launched something even darker, a large-scale industrialized forced organ harvesting industry built on the bodies of Falun Gong practitioners, which they had started persecuting the year before. The crime rested on two pillars: very vicious, dehumanizing propaganda, and also a vast system of mass arbitrary detention that eventually ended up serving as the source of the organs. For 14 or 15 years, the world largely turned away, and emboldened by this, the regime expanded this same machinery of dehumanization and mass incarceration to the Uyghur people, and perhaps even to others. This is why the memory of Tiananmen remains so urgent. The Chinese Communist Party has never abandoned its core demand: total submission, or at least the appearance of it. Anyone who refuses, whether through faith, through conscience, or simple human dignity, becomes a target. That is why we must stand with those who still resist. Falun Gong practitioners who continue to practice and speak the truth, and the millions who have joined the Quit the CCP or the Tuidang movement to renounce their ties to the Communist Party, the Youth League, and the Young Pioneers. The white paper protesters of 2022, including brave young people like Zhang Junji, who stood alone in Beijing holding a blank sheet of paper, a silent indictment of censorship and tyranny, and paid a terrible price. Christians worshiping in underground churches, Tibetans demanding their culture and faith, and of course Uyghurs and Kazakhs enduring camps and surveillance. And every individual across China who chooses conscience over performative or actual loyalty. Their courage is living proof that the spirit the regime tried to crush in 1989 is not dead. Today, we are finally beginning to move in the right direction, I think, recognizing the true nature of the threat and starting to correct the mistakes of all-out engagement. But we must go further. By remembering Tiananmen and standing firmly with all those who resist, we honor the dead and keep the flame of hope alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And now, Ilshat.
Oh, no. I can do it. Thank you for the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation for organizing this event, a solemn event, and giving Uyghur a platform. With Tiananmen democratic movement, Uyghur is inseparable. The one of the leader, Urkesh Daulat, well known in Chinese, Urkeshi, he is Uyghur. At that time, I was a teacher in a college. I was excited, very hopeful. I thought one day, if China becomes democracy, Uyghur will have a freedom future. Ladies and gentlemen, as we gather to remember the victims of Tiananmen Square massacre, we honor the courage of those young students, workers, and citizens who stood peacefully in Beijing in 1989 and demanded freedom, accountability, and human dignity. On June 4th, 1989, the Chinese Communist Party chose tanks over dialogue, bullets over reform, and fear over hope. The exact number of those killed remains unknown because the Chinese government has never allowed an independent investigation. Even today, discussing Tiananmen inside China remains heavily censored. The families of the victims continue to be denied truth and justice. Yet, Tiananmen is not only a historical tragedy, it is also a warning. The massacre revealed a fundamental reality about authoritarian power. When a government believes its survival depends on suppressing basic human rights, it will often escalate repression rather than reform. The world witnessed this in Beijing in 1989. Today, we witness it again in the ongoing prosecution of the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, known officially by China as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. The connection between Tiananmen and the Uyghur genocide is not merely symbolic. They are chapters of the same story. The same political system that crushed peaceful demonstrators in Tiananmen has developed increasingly sophisticated tools of surveillance, censorship, mass detention, and social control. What was once enforced by tanks and soldiers is now reinforced. Labor systems and political indoctrination campaigns. For more than a decade, Uyghurs have faced an unprecedented assault on their identity, culture, religion, and basic freedoms. More than 1 million Uyghurs and other Turkish peoples have For more than a decade, Uyghurs have faced an unprecedented assault on their identity, culture, religion, and basic freedoms. More than 1 million Uyghurs and other Turkish people have reportedly been detained in internment camps. Families have been separated. Mosques and culture sites have been destroyed. Children have been removed from their parents and placed in state-run institutions. Survivors have testified about torture, coercive birth prevention measures, and systematic efforts to erase Uyghur identity. Many governments, parliaments, and human rights organizations have concluded that these policies constitute crimes against humanity, and several have recognized them as genocide. Some may ask, why remember Tiananmen when there are so many crises in the world today? The answer is simple, because forgetting Tiananmen helps make future atrocity possible. When governments are not held accountable for past crimes, they become emboldened. When truth is suppressed, injustice expands. When victims are forgotten, new victims emerge. The struggle of the Tian mothers seeking answers about their children is connected to the struggle of Uyghur families searching for disputed relatives. The students who demanded freedom in '89 and the Uyghurs who seek to preserve their language, faith, and culture are connected by common desire, the right to live with dignity and without fear. Remembering Tiananmen is therefore not only about honoring the dead, it is about defending the living. Today, as we commemorate June 4th, we must reject the idea that economic interest should outweigh human rights. We must reject the normalization of repression. We must stand with all those who face persecution for exercising fundamental freedoms. The victims of Tiananmen deserve remembrance. The Uyghurs deserve justice. And the future generations deserve a world in which governments cannot erase truth through censorship or silence criticism through fear. History teaches us that authoritarian regimes depend on collective amnesia. They want the world to forget. They want victims to disappear, not only from public view, but also from public memory. Our responsibility is to ensure that this does not happen. From Tiananmen Square to East Turkestan, the demand remains the same: truth, freedom, accountability, and human dignity. Let us remember the victims of June 4th. Let us stand with Uyghur people, and let us reaffirm that human rights are universal, indivisible, and worth defending everywhere for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir-Khan. Thank you, Dr. Patterson, your leadership, and for all the staffers from Victims of Communism for keeping this platform for us to share our stories, share the stories of Tiananmen Square. I am a Tibetan who was born in Tibet. At age 14, escaped from Tibet to India, and later got a chance to study at United States, and eventually I got the chance to work at Office of Tibet. So now I'm working as a Chinese liaison officer at the Office of Tibet. So during my term at the Office of Tibet, I had the chance to meet a lot of Chinese scholars, dissident scholars, activists, who a lot of them are actually the student leaders during the Tiananmen Square massacre happened. And I also had the chance this Monday to visit New York and going to a commemorative event in New York City in Flushing. Along with commemorating the 37th year of Tiananmen Square massacre happened, they also commemorated 60th year of Cultural Revolution, and also receiving of Nobel Peace Laureate by Liu Xiaobo for I think the 16th year. I think looking at all this event from the Tibetan side, at 1989 we are actually commemorating 30th anniversary of Tibetan Uprising Day in Tibet. And 3 months before what happened in Beijing, Lhasa was under martial law. We are going through a lot of crackdowns from the Chinese Communist Party, and people are dying there. Many of the stories are not able to come out because of the crackdown is so tight, and these things are still keep happening inside Tibet right now. I think all this event as on and I will pile up. What happened to the Uyghurs, what happened to the Tibetans, the Hong Kongers, and also many other ethnicity under the Chinese Communist Party right now. And I believe that to the Tibetan people, we had a vision that was laid out by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and his speeches and his advice that led us to follow the lead of compassion for nonviolence, for a movement that needs to be happened by dialogue. These things are, I think, it's really important for us to now to follow and go for a solution. And I believe that for the Chinese people also, that Liu Xiaobo, the Nobel Peace Laureate, also laid down a vision that all these problems that we have, the issues that we have, we can use our compassion, dialogue, dignity, respective way of resolution to solve these problems. So I hope that the ways or the solutions or the vision that laid by these two Nobel laureates will be followed by the people of Tibet and China. And also, lastly, that I hope that all of us, the Hong Kongers, the Uyghurs, Tibetans, and the Chinese, not to lose hope, although what China stands these days, that one of the strongest country in this world, wish that we're not going to lose our hope and use a strategized, systematic way to fight them back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you for the help. Thank you very much for Victim of Communist Memorial to invite me to attend this very important event. And thank you for your organization to organize this. My name is Ciping Huang, Executive Director for the Wei Jinsen Foundation. And for the past 37 years, we have been holding protests in front of Chinese embassy every year. And I fondly remember that Dr. Lee Edwards and his wife would come to our event to speak. So thank you. So now I'm standing in front of this statue of Goddess of Democracy. And this is this reminds me what it was on the Tiananmen Square back in 1989. And this is really important. Every time I drove past by here, I appreciate the Victim of Communist Memorial Foundation gone through a tremendous effort to build this park, especially this Goddess of Democracy. And this is because it's not just a reminder of the past, but it's also a hope for the future for us. I remember 37 years ago, the Chinese students, even citizens, still hold their hope for the Chinese communist regime. And they sort of appealed to the CCP, and they appealed for political reform. Some of them even kneeled in front of the People's Congress Hall, begging the government for change. However, the Chinese government responded with machine guns and tanks. And those people who believed, peace, rational, and nonviolent. But a totalitarian regime only responded with violence. So now, 37 years later, we see the change year after year. We see in particularly what has changed to the Chinese people. That Chinese people nowadays knowing the Chinese, you cannot begging, hoping the Chinese Communist Party to change their heart. This is the nature of the communist. It's the evil nature that you cannot expect them to change. But we have the duty, we only through the end of this communist dictatorial regime, then there is some hope for us. But on the other side, 37 years ago, the whole world watched the crackdown by the communist China. Yet, on the reality, like we just have listened, since the communist government took power for decades, there was many millions of people died through various policies, through various wrongs. This is not just happened to China, but also happened to the rest of the communist regimes in the world. But in China, not just Chinese, Han Chinese people suffered, which is there was tens of millions of people starved to death or died of so-called one-child policy, but also there was other people, such as we just heard, the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, now the people in Hong Kong are all suffering from this totalitarian regime. So what should we do? I think we must unite together to end this largest communist regime in China. I'm glad to see today not just Chinese and Americans, but also Uyghurs and the Tibetans and the Hong Kongers are here. We are here together not just to protest the massacre of June 4th, 37 years ago. It's more importantly, we are here to renew our hope, our determination to end this communist regime in China. This authoritarian communist regime is not just the suppressing the people in China, but they also damage the world peace. So we are here for the future. We are here for the future of ourselves, for the Chinese, for the Tibetans, for the Uyghurs, for the Hong Kongers, and as well as the peace of the world, especially democratic Taiwan. So let's us join together to end the totalitarian regime of the CCP in China. Only so there will be democracy, freedom, and human rights in China as well as the world peace. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, the victim of Communism Foundation. You keep your dream put into the action. Thank you very much. You give us a hope because in Washington, D.C., there are so many Chinese businesses purchased by the CCP regime. They want them to influence our government. They want to influence all the people in Washington, D.C. and anywhere in our businesses and in our government. We are here. We joined together. We tell people in the world, we shall never forget. We shall never give up. Let's keep a fight, fight, fight. We experienced the Chinese Communist Party regime, one-party dictatorship. Many of us were suppressed in mainland China. But we thought after we escaped from China, we would have more freedom. We'll have a peaceful life here. But what we see is a transnational repression want us to forget about the Tiananmen massacre. And thousands of people died in Tiananmen and elsewhere. I myself was in the Tiananmen democracy movement. And that time I was a journalist. Our Beijing Review magazine is one of many languages, one of a magazine. There were more than 30 languages. The CCP, Chinese Communist Party regime, keep lying to the world ever since the early 1950s. They know they can use the media to brainwash people, to make those who want to tell the truth be afraid, and they want to make people to be confused. But we are the people. We'll never forget those days that fascism regime, even today, still keep millions of Uyghurs, Tatars, Tajiks, and other minority alike in the so-called education camp. And they refuse to let people know. They refuse to shut it down. And Dr. just made a speech, Ilshat H. His own family have several members, many years, couldn't even contact with him. And I myself have relatives died after Tiananmen massacre 1 year anniversary. The CCP want to crush people down, want people do not remember what happened the year before. I was there. I saw people were so mad, and I wanted to take a picture of a military truck in the northwest corner by the big red wall. And the neighbors come up and told me it was a group of military drove the car, this military car there. And then they jump down. They start burning it up and tear it apart and videotape by themselves. And then the next day, what happened, what I hear, what we, the Chinese people, especially Beijing people, heard is thugs, students, and Beijing citizens, and attacked military. The CCP is a lying machine. All over these years, I worked in Beijing Review magazine. I know how they lie. They plan to lie year before the time comes. They have a planned meeting 1 year, 1 quarter, 1 month, and every week. The so-called Chinese news is just a CCP planned lying game. And we cannot accept this same regime lying to the world continuously every day, everywhere in the world, every city is called some city name, and then information, a Chinese information network. This is almost all Chinese knows. So we must stand together against the CCP lying machine and this inhuman machine, and against the people in the world. We want to say, take down CCP! Take down CCP! End the CCP! End the CCP! Thank you.
Thank you. And now I want to yield the floor to Dr. Patterson to close this evening. Thank you.
Well, I don't think that there's anything that I can add to the words that we heard tonight. The words of, as one person said, of a solemn commemoration, but also of a renewed vigilance for us to stand against the crimes and the terror that is the CCP today. And so at this point, if you have your candles, we're going to formally close the ceremony. If you'd like to do photos with the Goddess of Liberty statue, if you'd like to bring your candles forward to the front for photos or things or for your group, we invite you to do that now. Let me just say thanks to the team that organized this, to each of our speakers, and to the valiant example of our HRDA award, our Human Rights Dissident awardee for this year. Thank you so much, Francis.
And that brings us to the end of this evening's program. I want to thank you all once again on behalf of myself and Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And with that, have a good evening.